Look, I gotta fix this. I didn't catch that. My one little thing I didn't catch. My little G goes through the house and she goes like this to each light every week. It's part of her artistic expression. So we're gonna talk about expressions today. Are you ready? So I posted on social media a little post this last week about a home invasion that I had. I woke up in the middle of the night to sounds, and I sat up in bed and thought, what is that sound? What is that sound? Anyway, long story short, I realized after the sound was silenced for a little bit and I was debating whether or not I really go for it and see what's there, you know, I really get all my gear ready and start investigating the scene. I start to notice that it's scratching, and I've heard this scratching before, so I find out that it's probably a raccoon in the crawl space trying to come into the house. So I take care of that. But anyway, I posted on social media, and I have to share with you one of the posts that I got back in the comments. So my very favorite reply was this. I was just laughing. And this is not really actually funny. If you think about this happening, it's not funny at all. But my Bonita, this is what Bonita said when she replied. She said, "Oh boy, I had one inside my house one night when I was a single mom. My daughter was about 4, she said. I called my next door neighbor who came over with a shotgun and shot it in the kitchen." No, it's not funny at all. Pretty traumatic. He made a coon skin cap for his son. They shouldn't be laughing because it is not funny at all. But like literally I had that thought, like imagine, because I used to have a neighbor, he's in his freedom form now, but I used to have a neighbor that I could have called and he probably would have come over and done the same thing. So my mind is just thinking like, where did the bullets go? Did it like break the floor in the kitchen? What happened? But just imagining that for a moment, imagining that extreme reaction, that overreaction, that experience. And Benita, I just want to thank you for the serotonin that came from my laughing fits that were fairly continual for quite some time, as I just was in shock at that reply. And so my heart goes out to you in that past trauma. But let's talk about that for a second. Overreactions and trauma, right? Let's talk about what happens when we have explosions. What happens when we start firing? What happens when we live unskillfully, or when we haven't addressed, let's look at our internal landscape, right? So we often take things to the limit. We often go too far. We often have reactions that maybe we wouldn't necessarily categorize them as mindful, spiritual, grounded, or even, balanced with the level of response probably required for a situation. Do you get what I'm saying? How many of us have responses that are more extreme or dramatic than is really required from a situation? It is unconscious behavior that leads us in those directions. And it ends up having us expend more energy than is needed, overcomplicating things, dramatizing things, sitting in excessive drama. You know, I just recently had the beloved that spends time with my little G go out of town. So we had a little bit of time without her. So my other beloved came to be with her on Sunday mornings. And last Sunday morning, so I have a little routine, right? Set up. We have our routines. We have what we expect. So last Sunday morning, there was an early arrival. So I was kind of excited to have extra time, but communication wasn't spot on. And so the time just kept going until it was about 10 o'clock. So I didn't feel like I had my head space. I kind of felt like I was coming to you in chaos. And so what was happening, what I was watching the whole time, were these stories going on in my mind, were these little explosions happening, these little thoughts, and noticing that I am building a story here about how this isn't working for me, and why isn't this working for me, and you know, blame starts shooting raccoons over here, and guilt starts shooting raccoons over here, and chaos starts shooting raccoons over here. I mean, it was a battleground. It was a battleground in my mind. And I almost spoke from that place. And instead, I remembered the practice. When there is a battleground, it is my time to dive in. It is my time to look within and see what the opportunity here is, right? Do you know what I'm saying? Do you know when you're at that place? Do you know when you're in that space? Can you identify? So I paused, I took a few deep breaths, and I realized that if I reacted or spoke from right here, what I would end up probably doing is firing at the person that is helping me the most, right? Firing at what is my friend. And what later on would be a different conversation, a simplified conversation, a conversation that might go something like this. I or we didn't communicate well about our agreements in the future, or if there's a next time, could we this by then? Does that work for you? Simple, done, thank you, honor. Do you know what it would have looked like if it happened on Sunday morning, 5 minutes before the service? It would have looked like that raccoon in Benita's kitchen. That's what it would have looked like. So having a spiritual practice allows us to metabolize energy so that it can be allocated in the highest and best ways. So it does not get stored in places we don't want it. It does not build up and create toxicity, but rather it assists us. One of my favorite current leaders and authors is Richard Rohr, and he says this. He said, all great spirituality is about what we do with our pain. If we do not transform our pain, we transmit it to those around us. So pain, when not transformed, is transmitted. Pain, when not transmuted, is transmitted. We may think that it's gone, we may think that it's not us, but in fact, what happens is it simply changes form. We simply pass it on or share it with others. And is that what we're here to do? Is that our divine calling? Is that our command or our charge? Scripture in John 13 says, a new command I give you, love one another as I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. So everyone will know if you have the spiritual discipline. Everyone will feel that harmonizing faculty, that magnetic love that draws to it more of itself when we stand in our harmonizing power. And so often we forget we have this power. In Matthew 5:44 and 45, it says, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be sons of your Father who is in heaven. So you may be expressions of the divine that is immersed in source, that is source itself expressing. It says, for he makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and on the unjust. So that's about being in the flow of life. That's about being an expression of light. That's about keeping the channels open, not engaging in the drama, which tends to shut down the channels of light. In the book Legacy of the Heart by Wayne Mueller, he says this: when we become habituated to seeking out high drama, intrigued by the infinite complexity of things, we often overlook the simple power of a single action, a simple word, or an uncomplicated gesture. We feel that nothing of importance is ever obvious, and the value of any truth lies in how difficult it is to find. We take pride in the complexity of our minds, drawing comfort from our ability to look past appearances and seek out the real hidden truth. We gradually adopt a hierarchy in our perception of reality. The more complex or dramatic an event, the more we believe in its intrinsic value. But as we constantly elevate the levels of drama and complexity in our lives, we become blind to the gifts and blessings that may arise when we approach the world more simply. How much more simple is it to pause, breathe, and go within? One of my other favorite authors, Paul Ferrini, in The Body of Truth, says this about co-creation. The body of truth is not separate from you or me. Truth lies within each of us. When we are aligned in it, our light shines forth. That light is none other than the light of creation. Creativity does not reject the past, nor does it try to imitate it. The light of creativity is eternal, yet also spontaneous and new. It does not insist or resist, but flows through when the channel is open. The channel opens when the ego steps aside. It is that simple. The channel opens when the ego steps aside. So how do we assist in the channel opening? How do we assist in the ego stepping aside? Because we know that conflict multiplies, drama multiplies, and all of that is error thinking. All of that constricts the flow of creativity, constricts the flow of life, constricts the flow of the harmonizing power and faculty. Remember, pain not transformed is pain transmitted. So can we have awareness around our activity, around our consciousness, around our pain, so that we can fulfill that commandment of being a harmonizer? How to expand our demonstration of this idea that we are called not to hide our light under a bushel basket, but to shine it from the mountaintop, right? Have you ever considered what your bushel basket is? Think about that for a moment. How is it woven? What is in there? What are the triggers? What are the things that happen? When do you create fear-based stories and have them run through your mind? When do you feel yourself more defensive? When do you feel yourself having a conversation or a story of limitation or constriction, either of the self or other? And what can we do to open the channel? I would suggest that we need more contact tracing. We need more contact tracing. So what does that mean spiritually? That means when something is experienced, we trace it, we follow it, we see where it goes and what it's doing. We do that both externally and we do that internally. When we do it internally, we get to do the deep dive and we get to ask ourselves the question, where did this feeling originate? Can I accept it? Can I own it? Can I own that it is mine? What does this experience look like? Can I learn it? Can I engage in a contemplative practice so that I understand and know my internal landscape? So I recognize my pain or my pain body or my drama, and I can see and can tell when I am offering that as my transmission to the world. And then can I look at where it's going in the outer? You know, I had a funny experience a while back with my little G. I recognized, you know, that she has some bad days. It's an observable truth, not like the whole day bad, but, you know, some days when the word stinker applies a little bit more. Some days where it's just a little more difficult. And in my observation of contact tracing, I decided to watch her behavior. And in Unity, we don't do that without watching our own behavior, right? So I decided to trace it outside and trace it inside. And as I was doing this research and had the tracking team going in my mind, I started to notice a pattern that led to these behaviors. Now, if we want to heal something, the first thing is that we have to see it, right? We can't heal it if we can't reveal it. If we can't identify it, good luck tracking it. Good luck transforming it. So, when I did my research, what I ended up noticing was that each time she was having a more difficult day, I had not gotten enough sleep the night before. Every time, without fail, if I found her to be challenging really in any way, anyone that knows her knows that she is not a challenging child at this time and space. If I found her to be challenging in any way, I started going back, doing my tracing, what is happening with her, what is happening with her routines, what's happening with her experience. And then I go my direction and what's happening with me. And each time, you were up too late. You got 5 hours of sleep, 4 hours of sleep, 6 hours of sleep. So I was able to shift my agreement with myself and make a change. I made a little rule. If I'm tired, I have to go to bed when she does until I'm not tired anymore. So however many nights that takes, and that was the beginning of getting into bed pretty early. But you see how I would have transferred that onto her, right? I would have transferred it onto her and started problem solving her issues. Started labeling her, started creating a story around her that then made her wrong or problematic. And what happens when we do that? It becomes an attractive force, right? It becomes a meaning-making machine of validating energy. It's like being in a court case and gathering evidence. I begin gathering evidence, and I may even teach her to gather evidence to see how that is true. I may begin to try to manipulate her. What we become aware of, we can master. What we are unaware of, what we can't trace at all, we transfer. And so much hurt happens because of that process and because of that practice. But there is more than enough space, there is more than enough love, there is more than enough light within us and among us in the energy of awareness to presence ourselves and each other through all sorts of difficulties when we're not in the business of transmitting our pain and suffering. I was recently honored to host Martha Creek in a prosperity experience. And I asked everyone who's sharing in this prosperity experience to share what their top ideas are about prosperity, what their definitions are. And one of the things she shared was this. She said, prosperity to her has to do with having a contented mind. Cultivating a mind of contentment. Moving out of the place of complaints and into a space of contributions. And she does that so well, but what a beautiful definition of abundance and prosperity. And how often do we unknowingly close down the channel for contentment in our own minds and in our own experience? Paula Darcy says, God comes to us disguised as our lives. God comes to us disguised as our lives. What do we hide under that bushel basket? And can we begin the unweaving process? Ernest Holmes says in the book, Living Without Fear, he says, what we can become aware of, we can master. And since no man can set any limit to the measure of man's mind, there can be no limit other than the confines we set ourselves. That there is a mind in the universe which is without limit seems a true deduction. That we have access to this mind seems the only explanation of our ability to progress. That we must be one with this mind is an inevitable conclusion, else how could we perceive anything at all? That inquiry into any truth is some working of this mind through our consciousness is apparent, and that all progress is the unfolding of this mind through our consciousness is the only explanation for our continual progress. That this mind is a storehouse of untold possibilities we cannot doubt, and that the greatest possibilities of our future lie in the direction of our conscious unity with infinite intelligence that we cannot deny. Richard Rohr says that transformed people transform people. Transformed people transform people. So let's get to the business of our transformation. Namaste.